This is the Chapter 9 overview, and I'm going to get started. You guys can read all about the different characteristics of the first parts in the chapter. I'm going to get started with the focus on um, sexual harassment, because sexual harassment is something that, unfortunately, about half of all working women experience at some point in their careers. I know I did when I was younger, and many of my friends as well experienced it. So I want to start with this. Um, what is sexual harassment? Well, prior to the early 1980s, we didn't really talk about it. And as a college student, I experienced sexual harassment um, more than once at various jobs, and I didn't know what to call it because nobody was really talking about it. We didn't really start to hear the term sexual harassment until the U.S. Supreme Court started to decide workplace cases. And so we can think of sexual harassment as an unwelcome act of a sexual nature, or what I prefer, which is any act that is unwelcome and of a sexual nature um, as viewed by the recipient. And so when the Supreme Court started deciding cases, they came up with a definition. Unwanted sexual advances in the workplace, regardless of its impact on salary or promotion. Because some people think that sexual harassment only happens if it's one person with more power who is um, engaging in unwelcome behavior of a sexual nature towards somebody who is a lower position or status within the organization. But that's not true. In fact, sexual harassment can occur between students on campuses, between students, between a student to student, professor to student to professor, administrator to student, vice versa. Um, so it can come in all shapes and forms. Is what I'm saying. Now, the sexual harassment generally, while it is generally done on the part of women toward on the part of men toward women, the reality is that women do and can and do at times sexually harass men. And of course, sexual harassment almost always is about power. Who has more power? Not always, but often. And now prostitution, because again, this is another really interesting um, topic that is controversial, I think, for the most part in the United States, although I live in Nevada, and here in this state, prostitution via brothels, it has to be through a brothel, is legal in 13 counties. What that means is that a brothel is a place, a business establishment where typically women work. They sell sex for money. And in these counties where it's legal, the brothels cannot be within a certain distance of city limits, can't be near schools, churches, things like that. In addition to that, there has to be regular testing. There is a minimum wage that is paid. Because these are employees, they are, they have health care, they have dental care, sick leave, vacation time, all of the things that we typically think of as being part of a job, as quote, a regular job. So the types of prostitutes, commonly streetwalkers, child and adolescent prostitutes, the house prostitutes, the ones who work in the brothels, and then call girls, high-class call girls. So streetwalkers, we've all seen them in movies. They're out on the streets at night and during the day too, depending on place, the city, and they usually are scantily clad, so they can promote their wares, their gifts, and yeah, uh, they are willing to be hired on the spot. You don't have to make an appointment. Child and adolescent prostitutes. Now, this is problematic. Streetwalkers are adults. Child and adolescent prostitutes, of course, are underage. And I have worked with kids who were um, child and adolescent prostitutes. When I was in law school, I worked at a group home for kids who identified as LGBTQ, who had either been in the juvenile justice system and parents didn't want them back at home because of their sexual orientation. And so the social worker placed them in that group home. Others were children who had been thrown out of their homes because they came out to their parents, and so of course they had been working out on the streets as either child or adolescent prostitutes. And the reason that they did this, from having talked to them, is because if you're under 16, you need a work permit. And this was in California, LA area. You need a work permit. You can't get a work permit unless you have a parent's signature. Well, if your parents threw you out of the house, you're not going to want to go back to get a signature on the form. And if your parents don't even want to see you because you were in the juvenile justice system and now that you got out, you're not going to want to go back and say, hey, can I get a signature on this form so I can get a work permit? They all said, if you are a child, a kid, who has been disowned from your family or you run away from your family because they are violent or abusive, you don't have a whole lot of options when it comes to making money. If you want to start selling drugs, you can do that, but you got to know somebody who's, can get you in to some drug dealing ring, and that's possible. But you could start hanging out in bathrooms, and you'll pick up a client or two, and you're on the road. You made some money. It's probably the easiest thing that they could get into to support themselves while living on the streets. As I already talked about, house prostitutes and call girls, high-class call girls. Typically, you go through a madam or some sort of a leader of the service. And of course, these are scheduled typically, so you do make an appointment. And these prostitutes are paid a lot of money. These call girls are typically well educated. That means also that they are knowledgeable about arts and history. They're very, quote, cultured, well dressed, well spoken. In fact, it is not unusual for some people, male and female, to pay their college tuition by working as high-class call girls or males. High-class call males, I guess we call them. One thing that surprises people very often is that prostitutes most often are not any different than the rest of us. They want the same things the rest of us do. They want a comfortable place to live. They want, friends and family members who love them and support them. They want to go to school. In fact, that's the discussion that I gave you this week, where you hear a young man talk about his experience working as a male prostitute, but he's also enrolled at an Ivy League school and a very smart young man. Some prostitutes have children. They may have partners or spouses. They are not all that different than the average person. In fact, you probably have seen a prostitute shopping in the grocery store with her kids or his kids, and you wouldn't even have known it. Of course, the most common reason for becoming a prostitute is the economic reason. If you are able to be successful at this, you can, particularly high-class call girls, make a lot of money. Some prostitutes even believe that they're morally superior to quote normal people or conventional people because they believe that their clients are a bunch of liars. These are people who pretend to be normal. They go to work, they have families and children, they go to church, they hold themselves out to be these very proper, normal people, and yet here they are on a regular basis visiting prostitutes. Um, and so, um, one of the claims for the positive side of prostitution is that it actually serves a function. From a functionalist perspective, if prostitutes are available, then men can preserve the morality and the purity, so to speak, of get to that functionalist theory of their wives or their girlfriends. And so, if a man wants sex that is out of the ordinary sex with his partner, he can go to a prostitute and get that analingus or anal sex or S&M or whatever it might be, and therefore his partner, his normal female partner, does not have to be sullied by these types of activities. In addition to that, we expect good females, in particular, we expect good females to wait until marriage to have sex. And so, again, from a functionalist perspective, prostitutes are available to men who would like to have sex before they're married, but their good normal partners don't want to do so. And so, again, helping to maintain the pristine status of the normal female partner. And so, essentially, because morality, this idea of good and bad, this kind of sex is good within relationships, married, meaningful, and this other kind of sex is bad, sex with a prostitute, it's meaningless, then that system of morality enables the good normal people to continue having their morality, but the prostitutes then are serving people who prefer something other than that good moral sex. Social psychological theory argues that there are three factors that may push a person or make a person go into working as a prostitute. Predisposing factors. These are things such as growing up in an abusive home or being mistreated by family members, such that the individual's psyche is somewhat damaged. And by the way, this theory is not making the argument that all people who experience that will become prostitutes, but that these are some factors that might play a role in a person becoming a prostitute. Attracting factors. Well, the money, freedom to set your own hours, the fact that you can be your own boss if you choose to be, the fact that you are being honest with yourself and your clients, that, hey, this is what I'm doing, that I'm offering a service, you're paying for it, we're going on. Precipitating factors. Precipitating factors are things that occur that might make it much more likely that a person will work as a prostitute. Things such as losing a job and the rent's due, or the car getting repossessed. And okay, well, the car got repossessed, now I can't drive that hour to work. But I've got to pay my bills, and so maybe now the person starts working as a prostitute. Or perhaps knowing somebody who's already working as a prostitute, and the person telling a friend, hey, this is, you could do it too. I've been making some really good money, and I've paid off my bills, and in a new apartment, etc. Knowing people who are doing it could also be perhaps the precipitating factor. But again, none of these things in and of themselves or causes. It's just the idea that this might play a role. And two other theories, oppression and empowerment theory. Oppression theory is the view that prostitution is a negative social phenomenon. And of course, feminists who focus on patriarchy are tend to support this idea that because of the patriarchal society where women are subordinate to men, of course, women's bodies are objectified, and of course, women are much more likely to work as prostitutes than men. And it's patriarchy at work. It's a way to keep women subordinate and objectify their bodies. Empowerment theory is this idea that prostitution, and that's a typo there, their bodies. Empowerment theory views prostitution as a means by which women can take control of their lives and their bodies. Right? They can decide when to work, which clients to take, which ones not to take, set their own prices for their services. That it's a way for some women to take control of their lives and their bodies. However, there's a third perspective, the polymorphous theory. And polymorphous theory argues that the other two are really focused on just one part, one aspect of prostitution. Oppression theory is focused on the negative, empowerment theory is focused on the positive, and polymorphous theory focuses on both the positive and negative characteristics of prostitution and the sex trade. And remember, this is specifically talking about prostitution, but there are many different types of sex work that people might engage in. Commonly the strip clubs. Again, these theories could be applied to those types of situations as well. You think about women who work in a strip club. Oppression theory again might argue, well, they're only using their bodies because that's what they've been told. The only thing they have that's valuable. Empowerment theory might make the argument, well, these are women who have decided, hey, look, I've got these attributes, physical attributes, and so I'm going to use my attributes to make some decent money. Whereas polymorphous theory would make the argument that, well, yes, stripping might mean that a person is able to work when they want to work and only work performing certain types of dancing, etc. And then of course there's the people who do another type of sex work, people who do the phone calls, the sex calls, talk to different clients. So all these theories can be applied to those as well. All right, that's my little overview there.